manager at the North Carolina Alliance for Health, and we're a statewide coalition that's advocating for equitable health policies in the areas particularly of tobacco use prevention and cessation, healthy food access, and active living. We also are involved with a broader range of cross-cutting priorities that include all the social determinants of health.
Buenos días, good morning. Juvencio Peralto, and the executive director of the Association of Mexicans in North Carolina. Some of the work we will be doing is working around health equity and education equity across the state, and building conditions around addressing the needs of the state of North Carolina.
Hello, y'all. Jaylen, I'm the policy director at the Carolina Farm Stewards Association. CFSA is a 40-plus-year-old farmer-based nonprofit that serves North and South Carolina. We're a member-based nonprofit, so we have around 2,500 members in both states, and we do a variety of services for farmers. We do on-farm services, technical assistance for growers around organic transition and food safety, high funnel support, and then we do have a whole education team. We do conferences and trainings with NCAH for farmers, and then we have a policy team that I lead, where we hear from our direct TA providers, our farm service providers, and from our members about the policy needs of small and mid-sized farmers. And we react to that and lobby at the North Carolina General Assembly, the South Carolina State House, and in DC. We're a member of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, which is a large national group that it's kind of like 100 CFSAs all working together across the country. So we're very lucky to have those partners in DC. So we do a lot of direct lobbying, and then I'm also on the community strategist team. I get to work with amazing food council members across the state and support them in their local work.
Good morning, I'm Molloy. I am with a group called Care for Carolina, which might seem a little bit like an outlier for a Food Futures conference, but there's a big strong connection because we're working on covering the uninsured, and a lot of people who work in the food world are struggling with insurance, and a lot of folks who are food insecure are struggling with insurance issues. So, and I'm here to be a spark of hope that hard policies can happen.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Martin, and I am the state director for North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia for the Black Family Land Trust. Black Family Land Trust, our focus is mainly on those communities that have been underserved and misinformation given to. Our focus is to direct this information so that our small acreage farms can take their farming or their woodland conservation efforts to the next level. And so our organization is 19 years old. We're celebrating that this year, and we're happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all all. So we know we're in the heat of General Assembly long session this year. Just saw a budget from the House yesterday. Would love to hear from y'all what state level policy issues you guys are working on this session and what you're looking for during the rest of the session. I'll start with you, Carrie, and we'll work our way back down.
Okay, so at the Black Family Land Trust, we have two programs that we primarily work on. The first one is the land ethic, and that is teaching communities how to value their land and to be able to make proactive decisions about their land. The second one is called the wealth retention and asset protection. And what that is that work falls under the heirs property. So what we are doing and advocating for is a uniform petition of heirs property act. Currently, it is not a bill, and so they did not make it for this session, but we are advocating for that. And we're advocating for that because it allows our communities with heirs property, and that is the families that died without wills. And so your co-tenants in common with that property. And so it allows them to be able to fully participate in the USDA product, as well as be able to use that land to have benefits, be able to have farms, be able to use it as they will, for their family.
That's great. And I know y'all had a bill last year and y'all are going to continue to work on that. So
we're going to continue to work on that.
I just found that out. There's no bill?
There is no bill. We are hoping to be sponsored by Senator Jim Perry. But we are still working. Commissioner Troxler, he has now signed on to say that he was in favor of that. bill, but we do not have one at this time.
Yeah.
So that's another way to advocate for us, is to go to your district, leaders and advocate for the uniform petition of heirs property.
Right.
And so, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
so much, and it's so much to talk about under that, because families are losing their land. And because the rules of North Carolina, we are the only state that does not have a uniform petition for heirs act. And so what that will do is that if you do not have a will, you fall under the heirs property. If for some reason your property is, or your family property goes into control, or a outsider is able to penetrate that. And how that happens is cousin Joe in New York doesn't have an affiliation in North Carolina. So the predator comes to say, hey, you don't have any interest down there. I'll buy that from you for $500. Well, what would it take to get that off your hands? So that outside interest has just as much control as the other heirs in that family. So at that point, when the predator starts going to work, he will call for what they call a petition. And they'll petition the courts because they will say, we cannot decide what to do with this property. So the judge, because we don't have that Uniform Petition Act, the judge will order that property to be sold. Not necessarily a matter of money. It's a matter of not working together and not having the laws in place so that our community can work together. So again, the judge will cause the property to be sold. It is not appraised by an appraiser. It is sold on auction. So when the auctioneer raises his gavel, a property that is worth millions can be sold for thousands. And so the Uniform Petition Act will allow that family to have the right of refusal. So if it is sold, it will give them the opportunity to purchase that land. If they are behind in their taxing, this law will allow them to have a period to catch up with those taxes. So it's very important that we try to support families in that heir property situation.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I didn't realize we were the only state that hadn't done that, but such an
Thank you.
important point. I'll go over to Meg here, whose issue has had some real traction, this legislative session.
Yeah, so it's a funny story. The process has been in place for 9 years, trying to have Medicaid expansion happen in North Carolina, and it was probably the most contentious issue, but in the last 5 weeks, it is flying through the North Carolina House and Senate. If you all are tuned in, Valentine's Day, so February 14th and 16th, there were 2 bills in the House that passed by a significant majority. And then this week, Tuesday and yesterday, there was the 2 votes in the Senate. There were only 2 no's in the Senate, and some of that was interesting because 3 people who would have been voting no were not there, which is, I think, the leadership was in play there in that one too. So it's moving very quickly, and there's still work to do. This is not a done deal, but it is I think it's history in the making. So we can talk more about that, but the House Bill 76 is the bill number, if you're tracking it, and it needs to go to concurrence. It'll happen next Wednesday in the House because the Senate and the House versions were different. But they had a kind of a meeting of the minds. They did a conference prior to it going over to the Senate. Normally there's a conference committee afterwards, but they did a pre-conference. And you probably saw in the news, there was a big press conference when Senate and House leaders said we have made a deal. And so that kind of happened prior to going over to the Senate. So it's on fast track. There's still some work to do though, because after concurrence, the bill was written so that there has to be money included in the budget, and the budget has to be passed and signed by everybody, signed and voted by June 30 for the finances to work. There's a big financial component. So we still have to push for it to get finished and to make sure that it doesn't go south, because all kinds of things can pop up right at the last minute, as you all know. So we're hopeful. Yes, we can have something else to do. And we hope that you all can keep track of it. And anyway, it's very exciting. So stuff right there.
And what does Medicaid expansion do?
Medicaid expansion, it covers folks who, so North Carolina Medicaid qualifies folks for insurance up to 42% of poverty. What Medicaid expansion will do is expand that population from 42 to 138% of poverty. And this all started with the Affordable Care Act 10 years ago that gave people an opportunity to have less expensive insurance on the exchange, but there's a gap that's below it where folks do not qualify for those subsidies or tax credits. So they actually would have to pay more for insurance in that lower wage band than folks who are at higher, which was an unintended consequence of some national politics and a lawsuit that throughout the whole thing going together as it was intended. So 600,000 North Carolinians fall in that coverage gap. And so, and most of them are working for, about 76% of those folks work for more than one job, but those jobs are not for benefit. So it will bring working people. It also allows for the first time people who are childless, who fall in that working band, adults who have insurance options. So a lot of them are veterans, a lot of them are farmers. The number one occupation is restaurant and bar workers, also food producers and farmers and fishers. So there's a whole lot of people who are in this huge manufacturing and food production space who are uninsured. When you put all those categories together, it's number one. And for many food insecure families, the medical debt and cost of medical care that's in just direct competition with having access to organic food, and folks who are food insecure are far more likely to have chronic disease and need medical care. So I think there's just everything that you all about. This is a big thing for making sure that people have access to healthcare and management opportunities for their health.
Thank you, Meg. I know it's been a long fight. Few hurdles left to clear, but we'll be pulling for you guys. Jaylen, I know you guys are working on a lot of CFSA. What are you watching this legislative session?
Actually, could you all pull up that farm share real quick? So, so at CFSA, in 2020, we responded to the pandemic in a way that we had never engaged in before. You can scroll up to the top, you can see it. So, as restaurants were shutting down, as farmers were losing their markets, we were thinking, how can we support in this time of need? And so we thought of this program, Farm Share. And originally this program was buying product from farmers and distributing it to restaurants to distribute out to their restaurant workers who were out of work and in need. And we fundraised from Blue Cross Blue Shield Corporate Foundation and from other entities about 3.1 million in 2020, 2021. And so we got this program off the ground. And initially it was only serving restaurant workers. They get boxes dropped off at their cooler of their former place of employment, current place of employment, and they can pick it up. Wonderful way to create a market for farmers when they're losing their markets and to provide food, healthy, local, fresh food for folks in need. So that expanded, and we started working with multiple food hubs around the state, and CFSA is really kind of serving as the intermediary for funding to then give to the food hubs, for the food hubs to buy food and give it to people who need it. And we trust the food hubs to work in their community to give that food out appropriately in the places they know people need food. So they're partnering with pantries, churches, whole networks in their communities. I'm going to keep scrolling down a little bit. And so this network has really grown, and Farm Share is working currently with 5 food hubs through that funding. And then we went to, you've heard of local food purchase agreements through USDA. All the states had the opportunity to apply for big dollars through USDA, through Departments of Agriculture. So CFSA actually partnered with NCAH and said, you all have this opportunity for funding. You all don't really have a way to distribute this food in the way that is mandated under this funding. If you buy within 400 miles, it has to be purchased from prioritized those socially disadvantaged farmers. And that's what we were doing through Farm Share. So we went to NCAH and said, we could be the intermediary for you all for your local food purchase agreement with USDA. They agreed, and now we have $7 million more moving through, expanding that out to work with 12 food hubs, 250 farms across the state, all buying local product and giving away for free to people in need. So that is about to get off the ground, and that $7 million will run for 2023 and 2024. But we want to think about this program intentionally and think about how, like, it's long-term. We don't want to just end in 2024. We want to think about the long-term of this program. So we're asking, we asked for the General Assembly for $2 million in 2021. We got it as part of that $3 million package. And so we're coming back to the General Assembly and asking for another $5 million. So that would fund farm share from 2024 to 2023, 2024, and would allow us to serve more food hubs, more farmers. So this is a kind of quick glimpse of that network map, but basically it's serving across the state right now through these 12 food hubs. We have some gaps. We're working with folks out west that's filling some of those gaps, which is amazing. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're advocating the General Assembly for a budget allocation this year for $2.5 million in both years of the biennium, which is fancy speak for $5 million. But it sounds a little better when you say $2.5 million over both years of the biennium. So we're asking for $5 million to continue that program, to continue to provide food for folks in need. Still coming out of it.
And just to clarify, is the appropriation ran through NCAH or is it through CFSA?
Straight to CFSA. It doesn't go through the CDA, it goes straight to CFSA. And so we are hoping, there seems to be lots of bipartisan support for it. We're really into supporting farmers. So we're hoping that we'll get it in the budget.
Yeah, really great. Awesome work. Juvencio,
Quick question.
yeah, go ahead, Early. Absolutely.
How were the food hubs identified, and can I become one of your food hubs?
The food hubs were identified, a lot of food hubs were in the Food Council network, and so I have relationships with them. So we really basically reached out to people we have relationships with.
Okay.
I think for LFPA, I think it's like a signed contract with USDA and CDA, which has been a nightmare. It actually has not been signed yet, I don't think. So I don't know if there's any opportunities for new partners in that, but we want to continue to expand. We are prioritized working with BIPOC-led food hubs who are serving and working with BIPOC farmers. So absolutely, I should connect with Kana and try and figure out what opportunities there are. Yes, please.
Just one additional point of clarification. So the initial CARES Act disaster appropriation, are you guys asking for more funding or is this a scaled back version of farm share?
No, I mean, we're asking for $5 million. So it's going to be interesting. Now we've expanded the program with LPA. You know, injecting another $5 million into it is going to be helpful, but it's like, you know, as we brought in more partners, money goes very quickly when you're working with statewide partners and trying to distribute money across the state. It's incredible. It's $2 million. Go away like that, but it has an impact. So we are trying to figure out how to maintain that funding level. There's a new local food purchase agreement that USDA has put out as a second round. North Carolina has $11 million that can be allocated to us. I think 5 of that is supposed to go to the tribes, and there's another $6 million sitting there. We've approached NCDA about taking it's called LPA Plus, about doing LPA Plus through farm share. But with this second round of federal funding, they didn't provide money for administering the program. It's just money for food. So it's really hard, like, yeah, a bunch of money for food, but like, you can't just like magically pay farmers and get the food. Like, you have to have someone doing it. You have to pay for storage and all that stuff. So that funding is a bit more restrictive. And so because of that, NCDA is feeling a little reluctant to even deal with it. NCDA is maxed out right now with all this federal money going through. And so I think they're going to give this next round of LPA to the food banks, straight to the food banks, and have Feeding America and the food banks do that work. But we're very nervous about that because the food banks and the food hubs seem to have a tenuous relationship at best sometimes. So there needs to be some facilitation between those relationships. And there's just not that money to do that. There's just going to be money given to the food banks and they're going to be told, buy local food. And then it's going to be a certain kind of situation. So we're trying to figure out how, as the current LP administrators and farm share, we can support at least facilitating those conversations between food hubs and the food bank. So whole bunch of bukus of federal dollars coming through, to support it.
Awesome, thank you. Over to you, Juvencio. What's the MEXCON, working on this legislative session? What are you guys following?
You know, I'm gonna come focus more into what we've been doing with partnerships. Advocating on some specific agencies instead of the General Assembly. As we know, the Latino community in the state of North Carolina is invisible under the General Assembly.
Who will allow it?
And across the board, the Latino community is very invisible when we talk about lobbying or advocacy and so forth. And so our name or our issues, they're not in the General Assembly. Period. So one of the things that I think is important for us to do, and what we've been doing is building coalitions and building partnership with existing organizations. They're already working on some of these issues. And I'm going to talk about the food access for the Latino community. In the beginning of the pandemic, we had so much need for access to food. And people were crying for food. One of the things that we found is the Latino community would have really benefit from some of the food that was given away. So what we did a research project with our local partners to figure out what the reason some of these Latinos that were not consuming the food. What we found, that was not a cultural appropriate food. And as we know, what we consume has a lot to do to the roots of who you are. And so that's what we advocate to some of our local food banks and local agencies, that if we want to get these people food on the table, it has to be a cultural appropriate. Has been very successful with our main partner, which is the food bank of Eastern North Carolina. It has really listened to us and also looking at the data that we cultivate with reaching out to the community, what they were telling us. So now what we see in the food bank and other food banks across the states are beginning to understand that the food that we consume is not the same food as everybody else consumes. And then when we're talking about long-term healthcare of these individuals, we have to provide the appropriate cultural food for them. So I think that's one step in terms of our advocating with some of our local partners. And also help our local partners to understand. During the pandemic, a lot of these traditional organizations and agencies that had never worked with other communities besides just their own communities, they don't know what to do. So us as a Latino organization have been doing this community work for the past 20 years. There was an open eye for us. We thought that, every single organization, nonprofit, public agency, and so forth, they knew that this community exists. So that's what I say that, yes, we have a migration of 20 years migration in the state of North Carolina, but we're still invisible across the board. And I think it has to be, I think if I've seen that it might be intentional, it might not. But I think we have to kind of continue to build and advocate with our local partners that this community exists and this community needs to be integrated within the process. Either to do things different as the agencies have been doing for the past 20 years and take a different approach to integrate these communities. Because if it don't, we're going to continue to have the same issues, and it's going to be one organization, two organizations trying to advocate for issues that are specific. And I think one of the greatest things is building these partnerships and understand our partners, what this population looks like and what is the outcomes. If we want to advocate and put them on the General Assembly and say, hey, this is what we need from you guys to support these issues across the state. The other thing is the state agencies. I think the state agencies is being really critical for the work that we do as organizations. They also had a hands tied when it comes about advocating for a specific issue with this population. They just to make them understand, but also be partners with them, because they're willing to support the work that the organization does, but there's limit to what they can do. So how we work around that and be the ones, us, be the voices of those communities with the support of our state agencies.
Thank you, Juvencio. I know you've convened a few groups around some of the
Yeah,
parks
I'm
that
gonna
you're
talk
building.
about that
Okay,
later on.
we'll get to that here in a second then. All right, Marianne, from North Carolina Alliance for Health. What are you all working on this session, and going forward?
I think I'm too loud to have a microphone. It's squeaky. No, not too loud? Okay. It's gonna be uncomfortable for all of us. We work on a lot of priorities, and we have a lot of interest areas, but the area that we're working on most strongly right now, and where we're seeing the most traction, is school meals for all. What we know in North Carolina is kids are held back by hunger. 1 in 6 kids are food insecure in North Carolina. It's 1 in 3 in our rural communities. And we also know that we have the resources to do something about this. And we know that people care about the issue. We've spent a lot of time over the last few years building a coalition around this. Some of you probably heard from Chester yesterday. He's one of the leaders of our coalition on this issue. We have Henry as well, who's one of our board members, has been a strong proponent for this with us. This is a critical issue, but this is one of those issues that's a really long haul issue, right? We are hopeful that we will get something in the General Assembly this year. We are not working a bill, but rather, yes, sir. Can we pause for a second, everyone, for the picture?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to make sure we all have an opportunity for a good face in the picture. We think this is going to be a long haul. We're not working a bill right now. There are benefits to working a bill, right? Where a bill is filed and you can look for co-sponsors and there's opportunities for action alerts and engagement. But a lot of times it doesn't work that way in the North Carolina General Assembly. And it's a little bit easier to work through the budget process. We're fortunate that the years of work that we've put in so far has led to some champions, especially among the party in power and the General Assembly. This is not a red or blue issue. I know that for a lot of health issues and a lot of food issues, it really feels that maybe this is a Democrat issue and it's not really an issue for Republicans, but that's absolutely not the case when it comes to school meals for all. When we're looking at how this resonates with voters across the state, it resonates with Republican and Democratic voters. When we're talking about whether or not child hunger is an issue that people recognize across the state, it's an issue that Republican leaders and Democratic leaders recognize is an issue. It's an issue for everyone. And I think that's part of the appeal of it. But it's also part of the challenge, right? That's a lot of people that come to the table. And it's a lot of people that we want to have conversations with. And even if we got school meals for all tomorrow, which we are not, I'm not committing to that, we would still have work to do. Talking about the cultural appropriateness of the food, talking about supper meals and summer feeding. The work wouldn't be done even if the mission was accomplished tomorrow. Did I answer the question or did I answer a question no one asked me?
Really good. I'm gonna keep it with you if you don't mind. So working through the budget process, there's not a bill, but how do advocates, folks, grassroots organizations, advocacy groups, how do they get involved with the work of Alliance for Health? If school meals for all is an issue you're passionate about, how do they connect?
We're gonna give y'all some opportunities. First, we're gonna pass out postcards, we're gonna pass out some QR codes where you can do action alerts right now. We have coalition meetings monthly, and those are open to absolutely anyone. Whether you're a state employee who just wants to keep tabs on us, they're quite ready to engage in advocacy, or you're a nonprofit employee, or you're just a parent. And that's not what you do for your day job, but you are interested in it. We are interested in having you come to the table. We have those meetings monthly. I always say that there is not, if you want me to come to your Thanksgiving table and argue with your cousin about this issue, I will come, I'm there. It is the thing that I feel would make the biggest difference in child hunger in our state. It wouldn't end child hunger, but it would get us really close. It would get us a lot closer. Yes, I'm happy to
Do you
answer.
know if there is a line item in the budget?
I believe we are going to see something in the upcoming budget. We did see something in the governor's budget, which is exciting. But I will say that this is a big apple and there's a lot of ways to take bites of it, right? You can take bites by maybe just having universal breakfast. You can take bites by targeting low performing or the lowest income schools. And how we start eating that apple is going to change how we work on this next year, the year after, right? If we, for example, if we were to get universal meals in our most low income schools, the ones that are kind of beyond the North Carolina average, then personally, I believe that makes it a more difficult lift in the next years, right? Because that means every dollar you're getting in the next years are for higher income schools, higher income areas, and that starts getting more challenging and more difficult. If we start with universal breakfast, it's the least expensive meal. It is the meal children eat least at school, but I believe we would get some of the immediate benefits like academic outcomes, tardiness, attendance, behavior for the bulk of the school day. So is that maybe a better appeal? But it's not up to me, right? It's up to General Assembly leaders and what they find most appealing and what they think will be most beneficial and most palatable to their fellow legislators and to their communities. And that's not necessarily my opinion. So I think we have to be prepared.
I just got a reply to mine. I was on the Zoom call for the review for all, and I got a reply. I'm in the 79th district, from T. Kidwell's office. And, the legislative position, and I just wanted to know, like, how should I go back? It's very broad, we'll follow up, but
Yeah,
take it part of the budget.
yeah, absolutely.
Enough about if it's part of the budget, so I don't want to be like.
So I think we're gonna see something in the budget. That's what I'm going to commit to you is I personally believe we'll see something in the budget. What I would follow up with legislators. Now my legislators, I do Rotary with and I see regularly, so they are tired of hearing from me. But what I always recommend is kind of being a persistent voice, right? But being a friendly and kind voice as well. Not everyone starts at the same point, and we have put a really heavy load on our legislators. We expect them to be experts on healthcare and experts on farms and experts on economic development, and they can't change their mind, they can't change their opinion, and they're flip-floppers. We put a really heavy load on them, and they're not experts in all of that. And so you want to be a voice that they can lean on, a voice they can rely on, a friendly voice and a persistent voice. So if someone doesn't agree with me, I'm not gonna just not call them moving forward, right? I'm gonna keep calling them and I'm gonna have a conversation. What will it take for you to care about this issue? What will it take for you to think that we need to do something about it? If you are in a school environment or you have children, feel free to use them. Kids are soldiers in this army too, right? They're the ones that immediately are being impacted by this issue. Feel free to invite, if your principal is open to it, to invite your legislator to eat a school meal with your child. Feel free to have your kids. I've taken mine to hand out stuff at the General Assembly. They enjoy doing that. They've met with legislators. My kids are noisy, as you might imagine, though. But just keep that conversation open, right? Be friendly, be polite always. A no is not a no forever. A no is a no right now. A no is a maybe later. But very few people, and I think Medicaid expansion in North Carolina has showed us that very few people are a no forever. And you just really have to think, I believe the world arcs toward justice, right? And you have to believe that and keep persisting at that.
You guys just got a great list of some really good advocacy tips on how to be persistent, how to move the ball forward. Thank you, Marianne, there. Advocacy in action. Thank you for reaching out to your representative. If y'all want to join the coalition call, please
We
do.
want to,
Yeah. Absolutely. Over to Juvencio. How can folks get more involved with the work of MXCon and help push that policy agenda forward?
So you asked me about those conferences that MXCon has been hosting for the past since the beginning of the pandemic. The pandemic really gave us an open opportunity for different stakeholders, but also community-based organizations. We established what we call the NC Latino COVID Task Force. A group of 25 began to meet and talk about issues across the state. The NC Latino COVID task force has grown to over 400 members now. Now, the NC Latino COVID task force has turned out to be the North Carolina Community Task Force. They continue to build. It is more a very interdisciplinary group from stakeholders, community-based organizations, individuals, and so forth. This group has really allowed us to really see what was going on in the state. So last year, we decided to take a tour across the state and just pick two issues: health equity and education equity, and travel across the state and bring different stakeholders and have those conversations deep into. We picked by regions. We did 6 regions. We did 6 conveners in Spanish, and 6 conveners in English, and 2 in Spanish. A total over 600 people participate in these conveners. Allow us to see the whole landscape of the state of North Carolina and the biggest issues and the last participation and engaging with Latino issues. That gave us the directions for us to bring it convening in October 2022 at the NCAH Center. We brought in over 100 leaders across the state to begin leverage our own Latino agenda. And the Latino agenda has 5 issues on the table: education, health, public policy, public safety, and economic development. This agenda is going to drive the work of the organization with our 9 Latino organizations across the state and sign this Latino agenda. We continue to build this agenda with other partners, not just only Latino organizations, but other partners who want to engage with our issues. We just host our first Health Equity Summit, which came out of the NC Latino agenda. And we have over 120 people, see some faces here that were just convened and rallied on February 24th. Next month, we have our second convening in Asheboro, North Carolina. And we're going to talk about public policy, public safety. And then in the summer, we're going to have a summit focused on education up in the western part of the state. And then we're going to finish in Eastern North Carolina to have another Eastern North Carolina Health Summit around this Latino agenda. So how can our partners, communities, and traditional organizations, because this is something new, that to be engaged to addressing these specific issues. And the reason we decided to call the NC Latino agenda, because I again say to you guys, I'm not a native of North Carolina. I came to the States when I was 16 years old. I had lived in Eastern North Carolina for the past 42 years. And I've been an activist and involved in the community for the past 30 years. Our issues have gone too far. And I'm just looking at back 20 years under my own lens. We haven't done anything really to bring this lift it up. So that's one of the reasons we decided to have our own Latino agenda. And the Latino agenda is not going to be driven by us as Latinos or Latino organizations, it's being driven by the entire state. So I encourage you and invite you to, if you have a chance, when the information goes out on this, and this is an open document that we have. We just present this document to 2 stakeholders this week. And now, in a couple of weeks, we're going to present this document to our governor and say, this is our Latino agenda, and we go across. We also presented this agenda to our community partners. We do have a couple of community partners that want to be engaged with this Latino agenda. This is an opportunity for us. I think this is an opportunity for the entire state to embrace all these issues. And again, these issues came from the community, from the stakeholders. It's not that they came from Juvencio you know, just wake up one morning and say, this is what it is. No, this is what it is. Over 400 people that participate in this convenience studying us. And we continue to build, because I think this is why we want to keep it open. We want to keep this document open to continue to build.
And Juvencio, how does someone join the task force? How do they go about attending some of these coalition meetings?
You can always send me an email and I can push it. And you will receive that information. We have a couple of newsletters that we send out every 2 weeks. So you can get that information, what's going on within the organization. But then again, I think the pandemic has really opened an opportunity for us to continue to engage and embrace our issues.
Got a question?
Is the Latino agenda available to the public via email or website?
You know, this is the second question this week, and we are, but if you're interested to hear what we presented, we open to present it to you and then build from there. We have a lot of questions that want to see this document. And one thing is, you know, then again, guys, I think this took us 2 years. And there was no funding.
That's right.
You know, there's no funding for this type of work. And then somebody, one day we had a meeting and somebody said, we have a copy of this because I'm working on a grant. Okay. You see?
Yeah.
That's not fair. And, you know, because it's real information. You know, it's not an information that you just calculate overnight. It's a real information. And so we have to kind of be careful because of how we deliver this.
Okay, so contact this information.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Juvencio. Jaylen, got an action alert from you yesterday. What can folks do to engage with CFSA and some of the policy work you guys have going on?
Yeah, so you can sign up for our action alerts. CFSA, we do action alerts at the state and federal level. It's our first state action alert of the year, so you won't be overwhelmed. Yeah, this is an interesting situation that we're in. So when we advocated for farm share of budget appropriation in 2021, we didn't really do public advocacy. We didn't really ask people to support us in the advocacy. We were asking for budget appropriation for, it's our program. It feels a little weird to be like, support us and asking for money for our program. So we didn't really ask for any of our 2,500 members to engage in the advocacy. We didn't do any action alerts. We didn't reach out to stakeholders. We really did behind the scenes lobbying with appropriators, and that got us our money. But now, you know, this program, the impacts are just so huge. I want to just share this real quick. I mean, over 85,000 boxes of food distributed between May 2020 and December 2022 to 1,500 households every week. 717,000 pounds of produce distributed, 32,000 pounds of meat, 24,000 dozen eggs, 20,000 gallons of milk, 3,000 pounds of cheese, grain, honey, and jam, 250 farms, 83 operated by BIPOC farmers, 15 food hubs, 7 BIPOC-led hubs. So we're really proud of that impact, and we want it to have further impact. So that's why we're asking for folks to support us. And we're asking for folks who may not be participating to support us and make an ask to the legislators in the hopes that you could participate. We get more money to expand out and grow this program. So we have a whole farm share campaign. I'm happy to share it with you all. We're really talking with appropriators in the House. The House is working on their budget this week. So the process this year is the House is working on their budget first, and then the Senate's going to work on their budget second. The House has been given a 6% increase in the budget overall. Is that correct? And the House normally they know what their overall increase is. They tell the subcommittees what those increases are, so they know how much money they have. But they told the subcommittees this year that they only were allowed a 1% increase. So everyone in the state thought this would be all this extra money that everyone's been working with, and kind of held it tightly. So the House is going to put their budget with a request to the Senate, that the Senate recognizes they still have 5% to spend, and they come back to the House and ask them how to spend that 5%. It's an interesting process this year. So we're advocating the House. We're hopeful that it'll be in the House budget, and we're going to be advocating with Senate appropriators. So there are very, Senate and House appropriators are very specific people who are working on this, and we have agriculture appropriators as well. So please get in touch with me and I can share our campaign with you. If you're in those districts, we really encourage you to reach out and ask for their support, especially in the House this week. So that's in anyone, you can contact your legislator and just ask for their support at any time. It would be helpful at this point. So yeah, my contact information can be shared too, and just reach out to me and also sign up for our action alerts and get that in.
Yeah, CFSA does a really great job putting out policy resources. So if you guys are in the farm space, ag space, definitely subscribe. They're actually, that's great stuff. Meg, 10 years in the making, you guys can see the light at the end of the tunnel. What's left? How can advocates get engaged to move the ball across that
Well,
finish
it's
line?
not too late, and can y'all hear me with this microphone? Pat, if you could bring up my slides, two ways that you all could help right now. And it's not just to kind of applaud as things go across the finish line, because we're not there yet. Let's see if you can find the Carolyn slide. First of all, do y'all get one of these handouts? Because what we still have some work to do, and the budget is our big hurdle. And as anyone who's worked on policy for a long time, even when things look like they're clear and the leadership is interested, there could be something else that flies into play that is unrelated, that derails this. There could be something about this that derails it. So what we want to do is make sure that we keep positive messages coming from all across the state, from all different districts and constituents to their legislators, so that they feel as thrilled as we will when this is finished, and that the budget is signed, and that the finances are all in there as it's spelled out in the legislation. So one thing I just wanted to just say, just a teeny bit of history. The Affordable Care Act is where this all started in 2010, which gave states the option to expand starting in 2014. All but 11 states have expanded. So when North Carolina does this, there will still be 10 states. You can see the orange colors are the ones that have yet to go. Where this block southern states that is more conservative politically. As part of that, that hopefully that color will shift and we will join the those that have passed it. We still have to do the implementation though. So one of the things I want to say is even after it gets to concurrence in the budget, the implementation of the law and then the enrollment for the 600,000 folks is a big part of why we are still invited to actively join the coalition. We still need to get those messages through. And once it is through, people who are close to the ground in their communities who can share information about how implementation is going, how people can enroll, what that process will look like will be just as important because that's what they want. So if you are able to, your organization, we would invite you to join the coalition. I am not very techy, but Jaylen gave me this suggestion. There's a QR code that you want to intern in, because I am 61 and do not know how to make a QR code, but it's over here. If you want to sign that, I'll take you to a website. You can just put your name in, and then what will happen, you'll get a weekly update on where things are. There will be action alerts when we need voices to be coming into the legislators. And we also hold monthly Zoom, stakeholder Zoom, where you'll get invited to those. So you can just hear what's happening, either before this thing is finished or after it gets finished. Both sides of this is really important. Next slide, please. I did want to just highlight though that this is a key policy for a strong food future. It doesn't feel like it is directly food related, but I mentioned before, folks who are in the food insecure category tend to have higher rates of health problems, which is not a surprise. And so the healthcare expenditures are much higher. And if folks don't have access to healthcare, then they really don't have an option, except to go to the ER when they're well past the point of having that healthcare managed earlier with all the things that medical care and lifestyle change can do. And as you all know, folks who are in the food insecure stage often just have to think about their household budget and food over medication is not a choice that everybody should have to make in North Carolina. So by the time we get finished with this, there will be the budget review piece will open up more options for folks so they can redirect their dollars towards other household priorities. I did mention before how important this was for folks who work in the food and the farm and fisheries world. If you look at the 3 green colors on this chart, those are all categories of food work fall in the health coverage gap. And one of the things that surprised me is that from a commercial growing point of view, health insurance is listed as the top threat to the business, because 55% of farmers. And in other states, it did expand Medicaid. One in farmers were able to sign up for the first time for health insurance. So this is going to reach a lot of people in the world that you all are in. Next slide, please. I did want to say it had been a long slog. Care for Carolina was established 9 years ago. I started working 4 years ago, so there were lots of folks who worked before me. It initially was out of the Heart Association, then it moved to the Rural Center, and now it's part of the Alliance for Health. So, you know, there's a big giant Venn diagram here where everybody overlaps and works together. But right now we have 175 coalition members. My role when I came on 4 years ago was to really try to bring in the business voice and elected leader voices, sort of the brass tacks tier who can really speak to the legislators in the business case for this, because it's going to insure 600,000 people, but it will also shore up our community health centers, our rural hospitals. It will bring billions of dollars to North Carolina for healthcare, but then in addition to that, there's just other dollars that will flow to counties and social services and health departments. So you know, there's just the whole financial component that every phone call was, do you know that North Carolina leaves $7 to $8 million on the table every day that we don't expand Medicaid? And that, you know, that's a lot of money that we can be doing some fantastic things with the state. Marianne?
I just want to highlight something that y'all have done really exceptionally well that I think is really important for local folks. And that's that, you know, 9 years ago when y'all got a no, never gonna happen, y'all didn't stop. You continued a state level policy campaign, but you really dug your roots in the local communities and local leadership. We can't run state level campaigns without local leaders. It's really critical to the work we do, and we need you. And I think Care for Carolina really demonstrated that.
Well, thank you. And that one of the things I was going to say is that I started just calling up businesses and county commissioners and town councils and said, this has been a political issue and you've heard a lot of rhetoric. Can we just put that aside and just start looking at the data to your county? Like, what will the benefits be to your county? And I'll show you in just a minute. There's a link to the second QR code on here. If you click on it, there's a map that will take you to click on a county, and it'll highlight the benefits, the number of people that will get insured, the number of dollars that will flow to counties, the number of business revenue, the number of opioid admissions. And this will help people in so many different ways that people have different lenses and they care about different things. So we just pulled facts that people could look at the benefits of the county, and then people say, well, then why aren't you doing this? And we're like, that's the question that we need to all be working on. I also realized that when you have an advocacy campaign and sometimes you need very quick action, not everybody's on speed dial. Like sometimes you get an email and someone might read it a week from now because of their schedule. So I set up a business advisory council that had people who were all over the state, who were from different sectors, that actually weren't all businesses, but we thought that just sounded good. So it had a couple county commissioners, it had it's chaired by Patrick Woody, that had the Rural Center. It had respected leaders who were pretty well known to legislators in different sectors. It was bipartisan by intent. So folks were hearing from folks that have moving back home. And one of those was former Commerce Secretary Sharon Decker. Maybe some folks who were surprising to the legislators that were really supportive. And I said to them, will you give me permission to just text you at 9 o'clock at night if my board chair or executive director says, Meg, we need to have 5 things happen tomorrow. And they said yes. And so I wanted to be able, you know, to not just go through this sort of slow process that we sometimes do. We needed a rapid communication piece so that 20-some people could be a small group that were in strategic parts of the state. And we actually looked at who do we most need to move and what districts they live in, and who in their district would be one of those great messengers for them. And, you know, thought about it. And so the very far west, Casey Cooper, who's the chair, Juvencio Cherokee, and so a county commissioner out there who was the earliest Republican leader to say to Senator Berger, my party needs to represent this part of the state. And some people who had stepped out a little bit earlier, we can pull into that business council. Just last night, I was texting with, Bertie County Commissioner Ron Weston, up in Bertie, the chair, and he said, I am getting right now, my county commission is gonna sign on Monday, and I'm gonna get all the surrounding county commissions to send it in, because that part of the state has a lot of uninsured, and it's been very, a little bit more politically difficult to have conversations there, and some of those legislators are still not as favorable as my group would like to see. So we just sort of gradually built this, this coalition, and then sort of different folks who agreed to take on different roles. We also, those elected boards, that also includes economic development boards and town and councils and tribal boards and mayors and one of the things that really helped us was to have the councils of government, especially the economic developers, say a lot of them just looked at the data that was coming to their county, and then they wrote letters to the legislators saying, this amount of money will come to our region, this amount of money will help the entrepreneurs and the small business people who don't have insurance, but are the most bright future for our state. So, you know, different metrics are coming up with some of those folks.
What is, I'm just like hearing all this, and like, that is like amazing campaign work. That is just incredible.
Well, and it's, I think the business component is a little different from what other states have done. And a lot of the other southern states are starting to look at how North Carolina's done it. But there was one day a couple of years ago, when Senator Berger stood up and he started saying every Care for Carolina talking point, and said it changed my mind. And I think some of you all were in the room and you couldn't believe it. So you just have to keep going. Next slide, please. I have a couple more slides. So
Meg, real quick, if you don't mind, I
Yeah.
think we're short on time.
Okay. Okay.
Lots of great resources on Care for Carolina's website. Definitely recommend you guys visit it. Great piece of legislation. It is not too late to contact your state legislators, to work with your local electeds, to help get that bill across the finish line. Really excited about some of the work you guys are doing. Carrie, you guys don't have a bill number this year, but I know heirs property is still front of mind. How can folks engage with Black Family Land Trust? How can they help support and galvanize around the heirs property legislation?
So, we do not have an advocacy as far as a volunteer board, but what I would like to do is just give you a little statistic here. So, 1/3 of the land, that is owned by Black and Brown communities is heir property. And so that's $28 billion in value. That's 3.5 million acres of land. So what I would like you to do is get a resource so that you can learn more about it and introduce this information into your community and other organizations that you have a voice in, or make yourself have a voice there. The tool I'd like to give you is called Farmland Access Legal Toolkit. And it's information that's collaborated by Vermont University. It will give you the heirs property understanding legal issues in North Carolina. So there you will be able to go and read and learn about those issues that I talked about earlier. But first and foremost, I want folks to understand that this is just not a color issue, that other Americans face the same issues in North Carolina. So advocate where you can. That's my tip. But what I want you to really do is to start at your own home. Because if you think about it, there are some families here, and I don't know if you have heirs property already. So start to organize your family and start to perform your estate planning. Do your wills, trust, your family tree, and start at your home and expand out to start talking to other community members about this issue. Like I said, we don't have a bill. We're getting folks to, to sign on. We're talking about trying to get the information more in our community. So advocate to your representatives.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Just real quick, I think that education piece is so important. Obviously, the bill, important piece of legislation, but educating people before your piece of property becomes subject to heirs property. Does Black Family Land Trust offer any estate planning resources or
We
Please
do,
show some of that.
we have a team of attorneys, that help and can provide some assistance with, establishing your estate plan. We also do seminars where we try to encourage our, participants to start thinking about and putting on paper those things that we knew grandma said I should have this lamp. Well, it's not gonna happen if grandma doesn't put it on paper. And the issues with the air property is if you have a piece of land, how do you, you have 1 acre, 4 kids, how do you split that in 4? Because how do you know little Johnny's gonna get the front roadside? How do you know who's gonna get the back? Because the back might not hurt, so you can't do anything with that. So it starts at home so that you can start your estate planning and land transitioning so that the next generation can benefit from the resources that you do have.
Thank you, Carrie. I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 audience questions, if y'all have any. And there was only 3 of y'all in here. I had written a few additional ones, but want to open it up if you guys do have any questions for this awesome panel. Mr. Cruz.
Could anyone kind of give us some information about the Health and Human Service telecare plan, Taylor care plans that's supposed to be that was supposed to start in April, but now it's going to be moved to October? How that affects the food and what we're doing?
You're staring at me like I know an answer. I was not. I was not take my question. I was supporting you.
That's all I know, Henry, the CJ got moved.
Yeah.
To October, but, I do know that the Association of Health Plans, the plans have been walking around the General Assembly talking to the legislators about things, but I think they,
How about the effect of, when the legislature has passed, I think you brought it out earlier, that if they don't pass it by the end of the year, the effect it has on hospitals, because of small minority, rural hospitals, they won't get reimbursed.
so what I know, is that part of the Medicaid expansion legislation includes something called HASP, which are some additional dollars that the Secretary Cody Kinsley can, because North comes down to Medicaid transformation, we're eligible to bring in a higher rate of reimbursement. And so the HASP language is part of the Medicaid expansion in the bill that just got passed in the Senate, and it will go back to the House and it needs to be added back here. That's one of the concurrent things that needs to change. And that's from, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's on the order of $3 or $4 billion. Additional dollars will flow down to the hospitals when they see folks who are in Medicaid. So the Medicaid rate will go up to more of the actual cost of care than the below market rate, which is what.
And the effect that would have on rural hospitals in particular.
Yes, it will definitely help the rural hospitals, the states, yes, both flows, both Medicaid expansion money and HASP dollars will be very important for those rural healthcare centers.
And that pressure, I think, is helping to move the partisan support to make
The timing of that, though, is that if they don't pass it by the end of the fiscal year, then this year's HASP dollars will not come into the budget, and so the budget makers want to pass Medicaid expansion with HASP so that they can then put it in the budget and accrue those dollars. And then they have to have it finished by June 29th, so there will be pressure on everybody to get it done. Well, everyone's saying now by Easter, but I don't know about that. We all with that. It's probably by June 15th is what most people are hoping, that the budget is done so that those HASP dollars come in, because that would be, that's going to help those rural hospitals tremendously.
Thanks for that question. Anybody else? Any question?
I had a quick comment. Oh, go ahead.
I just had a question. Thank you all for your presentation. This could go for anybody. I think that you all have mentioned on a couple of occasions the importance of perseverance and being consistent, especially through a no. And I was wondering if any of you all could speak to some of the challenges that may be associated with persevering. You succeeded in the past, and then Jaylen mentioning, advocating for the farm share, got money appropriated last go round. Are there some additional hurdles that you have to clear when you succeeded in the past, like I imagine placing seeds or something like that?
Great question.
That's a great question, and I'm gonna come from administration approach. At the beginning of the pandemic, the state, they don't know how to deal with marginalized communities. They don't know how to deal with community-based organizations that don't have a 401(c)(3) status. And we recognize that during the time, a lot of these community-based organizations were doing everything to save us from not to die of COVID. And one of the things that we wrote to the governor 3 times what was happening in Lewiston, North Carolina. The announcement of COVID was in March, and we didn't get a response until June. After 3 letters were sent out to the governor's office. And those letters was copied to the Secretary of Public Health. And there was a persistent thing. People were crying aloud and coming to us for help. And we didn't know what to do because we were in the house, not able to go out. And it was very frustrating, very. So our persistence was to not just only talk to the branch of Cooper's office, but go around to the little people around them. Finally, we sat down with the first secretary and then with the secretary and say, hey guys, this is what's going on. This is what's happened. We got to do something about it. So within a month, they convened 5 Latin organizations. And we give you these resources so you can help us, not help you, help us. Some of us, we went beyond what it was assigned to us to do. Because we didn't, state governments that say, hey, this is what we want you to do, and this is the deliverers. We went out and we did the best that we can with those resources in our hands. And we commit to them, but we also ask them to commit to us. Have meetings once a week with the different secretary, what was going on, and be persistent about funding for community-based organizations. And so we cannot do it because of all that. So guess what happened? They found an organization to be the house of this funding that was coming from the federal state and the state to deliver this funding. And that's how NC counties came in place. And that was not because they want to be nice. There was more persistence, and we were meeting with them every week. We got to find a way to do the deliverers to those community-based organizations. And the outcomes is one of the best. Now the state says, community-based organization, these community-based organizations, but there has to be persistence. And nobody talks about that. Then nobody says that NC counts and the funding comes from the state through NC counts came from a Wittman of community-based organizations. Because we told them right there, they say, it's a way that we can facilitate resources to those communities. And that the program that also was found for some of these community health workers, which is, I think it's a good approach, but I think it was just like a small approach that really didn't build an infrastructure for the future. So now all this work that was done and all this funding that was delivered during the town, it's just there. No actions. So now we have to continue to be persistent that we have to build infrastructure for what we had done. And we have to be persistent. Yesterday we met with the Deputy Secretary of Health and we're talking about that what is next. This administration, we just had 22 months of existence and we don't know what's going to happen. So while we have to be proactive, some other administration is going to come in place and not to forget about the roles of community-based organizations, works in any issue across the state. Because one of the things is we always ignore the community-based organizations. We always deliver funding to big groups, big organizations, and the last one, the community-based organization working 24/7, addressing social issues of communities, are not recognized. So I don't know if it answered your question because.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great. Convincing. I heard persistence, partnerships, and points of contact, reaching out to a few different folks.
And helping the folks see that it's not enough.
Yeah.
Helping them to understand that the yes, the first time was helpful, but more needs to be done. So.
Yeah. On that note, yeah.
Both
Okay.
Carrie and Juvencio also talked about a different approach to advocacy, that administrative approach, which is so important. Legislators come and go, governors come and go, but a lot of our agency employees are there for a long haul. And so building those relationships and engaging with them is really important.
That regulatory engagement.
Yeah.
And their attention span, I mean, they go from issue to issue, so you just have to keep moving back to. You might do that like every day. There's something else like, applicants.
Yeah.
Those people are.
Just real quick and close, are there any parting words of wisdom you guys would give advocates on the ground or folks, in addition to what you guys just said, any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to bestow upon people before we let them go for the day and on their own advocacy journey?
I would say real quickly, you've heard, like, we're members of the Area Property Coalition. CFSA is a member of the Carolina Coalition. We're a member of the Healthy School Meals for All Coalition. So like coalition work is like so incredibly important at the state level, working together, bringing together stakeholders and helping them all see their different pieces they can play is just so critical to state level advocacy. So I just want to point that out, that like without us all being in coalition together and being able to have those conversations across organizations and stakeholders to figure out different tactics that work from different angles, none of this work we have. So that's what.
Amen. And we, if anyone has, when I was mentioning the business leaders, I think business leaders, community leaders, community-based organizations, all of us have a voice and all of us are really important in communicating. And sometimes the story is what changes the legislators' mind. We can't talk to you. So don't just dismiss yourself as not having the opportunity, because the people who made the difference, I mean, I will say, with Senator Kevin Corbin, who grew up in Macon County, has become a champion. He's really pushed them. He has educated all of the legislators, and he's really moved legislators dramatically. And part of the reason he was able to do this is because he understands that he sees the people in his community that he was going to be reaching. So those people stories are huge. And so I think he just understands that. He talks about Amy all the time. He gives an example of a woman who he could not help. And so this is going to do 600,000 people across the state, and they're between my district and your district. It's really been huge in changing this years. So I think find a champion and really help them understand it at the head and the heart, because that is the moment.
So key. Data tells a certain story, but to add a face to the story really drives the message home. So thank you all. Thank you, Carrie, Meg, Jaylen, Juvencio, Marianne. Really appreciate all y'all's insights on advocacy policy. These folks will stick around if y'all have any questions about how to connect with their organization. Also, I do want to tease at 2 o'clock this afternoon, we've heard from our state leaders, those working on the state level. We also want to hear from you guys as a collective advocacy cohort here later this afternoon at 2 o'clock.